Hello, BookTube. Well, it's a new year, 2022. But before I can start talking about what I'm reading in 2022, I still need to wrap up what I finished reading in 2021. And since it's been a while since I was on here last, I have a lot of books to talk about. So I'm just going to kind of jump right into them. The first one was 13 Days of Midnight. This is by Leo Hunt. It's a YA horror novel that I had been sitting on my shelves for quite some time. I mentioned a little bit in one of my last videos about this book. The subject was about a young man. His name is Luke, and he ends up inheriting his estranged father's estate. And he's still a high school student. His mother doesn't even know that he's actually been contacted by his father's lawyer and that he's come into this inheritance. He's trying to, his mother and father didn't have a really great relationship, and he's trying to figure out how to go about telling her about this. But in the meantime, when he's signing papers, one of these papers is kind of cryptic and he can't even kind of read it, but in order to get the inheritance, which he knows will benefit him and his mother, he has to sign the papers that day, so he does. And that paper kind of tells him that he ends up inheriting a host, which is a group of like 8 powerful and dangerous spirits that his father controlled. And if he doesn't learn how to control them, it could be very, very dangerous. He's been left with some cryptic notes and a locked book that he can't figure out how to open, and that apparently is the clue to how to control the host. And it had a really great concept to the story, but ultimately I kind of felt the story dragged, and I didn't end up liking Luke all that much. He seemed a bit irresponsible even towards the situation he puts his mother in, or exposes her to, I should say. And the way the story ultimately ended, I wasn't too happy with the final of it. So overall, a little bit dissatisfied with that. Moving on, I read The Whispering Dead by Darcy Coates. She's one of my favorite horror writers. She writes these kind of thin little novels, but they just kind of drag me in. They're like potato chips. I just kind of want to devour one after another. This particular one is features a young woman named Kira. She wakes up in the woods with kind of no memory of who she is, her name, or anything. She's got some injuries to her. The only thing she knows is that she is being chased by some men and doesn't even know why, but is terrified. And she ends up stumbling upon this house where there's a pastor in there. He lets her in, and when the men come knocking on the door later on looking for her, pretends he doesn't know anything about her, and they go off on their way. The other thought in her head is just no police, no hospitals. For some reason, she doesn't want anybody to know, that she's there, particularly anyone in authority. So the pastor agrees to kind of hide her away for a while, give her a place to stay until maybe some of her memories come back. So she ends up staying at the groundskeeper's cottage near the cemetery. It's not used anymore at this time, and he gives her some provisions and stuff like that, and she works on trying to recover from her injuries, which aren't life-threatening or by any means or anything like that, but also to try and piece together her past. And while she's there, she starts to see things. For some reason, she seems to have this ability to connect to spirits, and she sees this woman who she becomes very fascinated with, who she is and what her story is, and if she can help lay this woman to rest. And that seems to be the main focus of this story, is her trying to uncover this mystery. She ends up meeting some other people in the town that she's in. Doesn't seem to be afraid to be going in and out of town where these people who were looking for her could find her. I thought that was a little bit odd. But the story is so focused on her trying to figure out this woman's story, I kept wondering, what about her own story? Why isn't she more concerned about that? And it just got pushed to the side to the point where I finished the book, and I'm like, but what about that story? And then I came to realize, oh, this is book 1 in a series. I don't recall off the top of my head what the second book is, but that would explain why, this gaping hole was left in the story. But I also was a little dissatisfied with that. It seemed very unusual for someone to not want to focus a little bit on your own history, especially when people looks like they're out to hurt you. So overall, I didn't enjoy this as much as most of her books, but it's still a pretty good, intriguing mystery with the spirit that she encounters and that person's story. I like that whole mystery and ghostliness of it. I mean, she does that really well. But again, I don't know, I would have liked a little bit more about her past kind of coming up into it. So until I read like the next book in the series, I won't know how I overall feel about this, but I just felt like it was a little missing something. Then I read a whole, or I should say listened to, because I focus on the audiobooks for these, but I listened to a whole bunch of T.J. Klune's books. He wrote House by the Cerulean Sea, or House in the Cerulean Sea, I think it's called, which I had mentioned on one of my previous videos. I really, really enjoyed it. And I had also talked about this one, The Extraordinaries by T.J. Klune. This is his YA debut. He writes both YA and adult novels. And this is about Nick Bell. It's kind of a queer coming-of-age story. He has ADHD. He's a fanboy. He writes fan fiction all about extraordinaries, people with extraordinary abilities. It could be flight, it could be strength, it could be all sorts of things. For some reason, in his world here, people, not everybody, but select few people have these strange abilities, and he's fascinated by one in particular, Shadowstar, who he has a huge crush on. And his main goal in life is to become an extraordinary. He's a little bit out there sometimes. His ADHD can kind of take over. He also has anxiety too. He lives with his father. His mother passed away kind of tragically. You find the results of how that happened within the course of the story. But he's kind of held in check sometimes by his dad, who can help calm him down and ground him, you might say, along with his three really close friends, including his best friend Seth Gray. Seth also went through tragedy, losing both of his parents, so he knows a lot what Nick went through. He helped him kind of try to cope with that situation. And Seth is, like I said, really good for him. I think in a way he also has a bit of a crush on Seth as well. So loads and loads of humor within this story. There's also a lot of good drama, a lot of good tearjerker kind of moments and stuff like that. But T.J. Klune does the humor. I found myself laughing out loud in lots of situations with this. I enjoyed it so much, I immediately went on to the second book in the series. This is a trilogy. This is Flashfire. Again, I won't go into detail being the second book in the series, but there is a third book coming out, and now I have to wait till July of this year for that to come out. But this one doesn't suffer like the second book syndrome in a series. It's not a filler book by any means. So much happens with this, and there's such a great cliffhanger that I almost wish I would have waited a little bit, because now I have to wait all this time till the third book comes out. But I highly recommend this one. Really great story. And I enjoyed that so much. Then I went on to his adult novel, Under the Whispering Door. This particular story deals with a man named Walter Percy, I believe was his last name. He was a partner in a law firm. We meet him at the very beginning for a short period of time, when we see he's not a very nice man. Very self-centered, uncaring, really nobody in his life. He's just all about the work and go home and that's it. Until one day he finds himself at his own funeral as a ghost. And he can't wrap his mind around that. He doesn't believe he's dead. And then May, a reaper, comes to collect him and take him on his way. He ends up finding himself at this sort of tea shop run by a man named Hugo, who's a ferryman, who's there to kind of help people go on to their next step, kind of come to terms with the fact that they are dead, you might say, and what their life has been like, and then to move on to wherever their next goal is, sort of a stairway kind of to the next step in their journey. And while Walter's there, I think you might say this is the first time he begins to learn what life is like, how to live, I guess. He learns how to live for the first time in this short period of time that he has. And it's shortened even more so when the manager, a mysterious kind of supernatural supreme being, shows up at this tea shop, this tea room, to say, you've got 1 week to kind of set your affairs in order, and then it's time to move on. And there's a wonderful little relationship that develops between Walter and Hugo. And I loved all the characters. They were also very well developed. And I love the progression that you see in Walter as he comes to realize the person he was before and not really liking who he was, and finding connections with May the Reaper and Hugo, the owner of the tea shop, and Nelson, Hugo's father, and then Apollo. Apollo's the dog. But it was just really, really a tender story. It deals a lot with grief and death, and there's some other serious themes within here, also suicide, mental illness. But TJ Klune balances that serious topics with lighthearted humor as well, and just a really good storyline overall. And I really, really enjoyed it. Then I moved on to another one of his because I became hooked. I listened to this one, How to Be a Normal Person. This focuses on, what was the guy's name now? How could I forget? Gustavo Tiberius. He's not normal. He runs a video rental shop that he inherited from his father. That you can imagine hardly anybody goes into because everybody streams things online. He goes into a coffee shop to get his coffee from Lottie's Lattes. He hates the name of the place. She's very friendly with him, but he's always just so straightforward and just doesn't know how to talk to people. He just doesn't know how to relate. He's just very unusual. And then he meets a guy named Casey, who comes to work at Lottie's Lattes for a while. And Casey ends up really liking Gus, which I'm thinking, why? Casey's very, very different. He's an asexual character who is a bit of a pothead, hipster dude, as he's described. Very different, but he likes Gus for who he is. But now Gus is starting to find himself attracted to Casey and trying to figure out how to be more normal. So it's like there's attempts at humor, but I don't think they did as I don't think TJ did as well getting that humor across in this story as he did in the other ones. There are moments that were funny, like when he's trying to buy the internet. He calls up a cable company saying, I want to buy the internet. And they're like, wait, what? He doesn't even understand the whole concept of the internet or using it, but the interaction and the conversations that he has with this person, I found probably the most humor within the book. But the rest of the story was just so. I didn't enjoy it, like I said, as much as some of his other works. And then I also read just a cozy mystery. This is a third book in a series of the Ethnic Eats mystery series by Kylie Logan, entitled Italian Iced. Just came across it at work, and it was Italian themed, so I snatched it up right away. I was curious. I didn't see the first two in this series at work, so I said, well, that was okay. The first one is Irish stewed and then French fried. And it features Laurel Inwood. She has sort of inherited this little bistro on the the train tracks. It's called, get the name here, Terminal on the Tracks. And it's a pretty rundown bistro, and she decides to kind of turn it into this ethnic eats place where they'll feature like different authentic regional menus from around the world, maybe by month or something like that. And this particular month, they're focused on Italian recipes. I think there's even a few recipes at the back of the book, like there are quite often in these cozy mysteries. And our main character, Laurel, was once a personal chef to a Hollywood star until she was fired for something that she really didn't do. And one day, someone turns up dead in her freezer. And as you can imagine, it happens to be that Hollywood star in a strange disguise. And so there are lots of suspects, including herself, because of the situation of how she, because the fact that she was fired, it gives her motivation. And the fact that this person is now dead on her own property doesn't look really good. So I didn't feel like I was missing anything for having not read the first two in the series. But I did get the impression that this character had, dealt with other kind of maybe murder mysteries in the past, and she seems to have a bit of a ability at finding out clues and things like that. So she, of course, kind of starts to delve into this right away. There's lots of suspects within it. I thought it was a fairly decent mystery. Not one of my favorite cozies, but enjoyable overall. So if I happen to stumble across the other ones, I might go ahead and read them. I'm not going to go out of my way to hunt them down, though. And then the final book I read in 2021, House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. Okay, yes, I finally finished this beast of 700 plus pages. The largest book I read this year, the longest book, freaking heaviest book, most complicated book. As you can see, it doesn't even fit within the cover. It's bigger on the inside, which is what the story's about. It's about a house that's bigger on the inside. I'm not going to go into all the details about this book. My general impressions I will talk about, but there are people who have put up unbelievable detailed reviews. There will be spoilers in a lot of these, but I started watching a lot of them after reading the book and realizing how much I didn't get out of this book. I mean, there's so many clues and things to follow, and if you really, really want to go heavy-handed into the book and search out all that stuff, there's a lot in here, and you may not get it all in the first read. I'm fascinated by looking into some of these videos. Pickles Reads, if I've got that name right. Pickles Reads, yes. That is a channel that I first came across, who did a really interesting review on it, and now I believe she's rereading it and kind of going chapter by chapter over her notes on camera of all the things that she, has dug out of the book, and still finding more things. So, yeah, you can imagine. But the interesting thing is you kind of wonder right from the get-go who actually wrote the book. Was it Danielewski or Zampano? There's this weird title page here, but before that, you have Mark's name on this page, and this page, as I came to learn, is not quite bound the same or with the rest of the pages. It's made to be able to tear out quite easily, so then you're left with possibly the actual author of the book, Zampano. And then there are introduction and notes by Johnny Truant. And Zampano and Truant's text within the page within the pages are in different fonts, so you can easily discern who is basically speaking within here. But it's all centered around the Davidson Report, which is a video that was made by Will Davidson about he and his partner Karen Green and their two children moving into a house on Ash Tree Lane. And it's sort of a new start for them. Will Davidson is a photojournalist. I think he's described as a Pulitzer Prize winning photojournalist. There's one particular photo that he won the prize for that haunts him to this day, about this starving child in the Sudan, and there's a vulture nearby. And apparently that whole concept of that photo, there's an actual photo that exists in the real world that they kind of worked into, like, hey, this person took this photo. But anyway, he sets up cameras all over the house as they're moving in to document their new life and everything. And what this video ends up showing over the course of time is there's something wrong with the house. The house is somehow bigger on the inside than the outside. There's one particular scene that just kind of made me go like that when I read it, and it's when Karen is putting up some bookshelves, and the shelves butt up against another wall, so the books are being held by the wall. And then they are starting to look into the house, and there's some kind of weird thing where the dimensions on the inside are bigger than the outside. And as they're looking at this, all of a sudden, a book falls off the shelf, and Karen screams, and it fell off because the bookshelf was no longer reaching the wall. And I was just like, oh, that just sent chills. One of the best parts in the book. Anyway, so there's this documentary, this video documentary that exists, and apparently a man named Zampano is writing about this documentary within the pages and explaining things and stuff like that. The problem is Zampano is a blind man. So how did he see the video? it's described that someone else wrote the notes for him and stuff like that, but it doesn't explain how he was able to see the video. Very strange. And then he ends up having passed away and left all of his notes and jumbles and paperwork and stuff, where a man named Johnny Truant ends up stumbling upon it when he's looking for a new place to live. And his friend Lund, I think I'm pronouncing that name correctly, tells him about this place, and that's where they come across these papers. And he kind of gathers them all up. He's very intrigued by it, and he becomes drawn into this story, and it really starts to mess with his mind. As the story kind of messes with yours as you're reading it, the whole formatting of the book and the weird text and strange pages and the footnotes, and you're led back and forth and all over the place with these footnotes, to the fact that you feel like you are lost in a maze, which is sort of like what the house is itself. There's a part where you learn that as the Davidsons are kind of gone for a bit, and they come back only to find a door that wasn't there before that leads down to this hallway described as the 5.5-minute hallway, which there's various explorations down this hallway, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger, and more rooms and weird things inside, and a staircase, and you can almost kind of see like a spiral type staircase on the cover. There are so many elements within this. It's just really, really fascinating. But yeah, like I said, there's so much within it. But I love the at first, like I said, when I was terrified to read it, only because I didn't know if I'd be able to follow along. There are things where there's nonsense text of just names that just go on and on. There are things that are backwards, which are really just forward on one side and reverse on the other, that you don't really need to read. But that feeling of the text kind of drawing the reader, like if someone's falling and the text is like you're reading down, like you feel like you are falling. It kind of puts you into the house in a weird sort of way. There are letters and photos and all sorts of things. I have the notes here where I had to like decipher a clue that you come to learn is hidden within letters from Johnny Truant's mother, who is in an asylum, and just seeing the deterioration of her, mind and stuff within the course of the letters. She just repeats his name over and over again. Anyway, it was a lot of work at times, trying, but still really, really interesting. There were some things, I still think about it sometimes. Well, I say I like I said, enjoyed it as much as a lot of people I've seen on YouTube. Probably not, again, because I didn't choose to or didn't see a lot of the things hidden in here. But it was a fascinating read. It was really, really intriguing. I think overall, you come to learn about the guy who does the editing in here, Johnny Truant. His storyline, at first I didn't care too much for, because of all the sexual exploits between him and his friend and all that kind of stuff. But when we start getting into the story of him and his mother and his upbringing, and then how this whole story, all these notes and things are starting to kind of mess with him, then his storyline started to get really interesting. But you feel like you're following kind of multiple things at once, including even the editors, the publishing editors, even their footnotes are in here, and the choice of fonts is also interesting. But again, I didn't uncover that. I found that out through YouTube, other videos and stuff like that. So I will leave you to kind of like, if you want to delve more into that, find those videos out there. They'll explain a lot of things that, like I said, I didn't get, but I'm intrigued to learn more about it as I kind of watch these other videos. But anyway, that's pretty much everything I believe I had finished reading in 2021. I'm not going to talk about what I'm currently reading. I'll bring that up in another video since this is already long enough. And anyway, I wish you a very happy 2022, happy and healthy, hopefully, reading year, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.